turn this morning to Luke chapter 15. We're not going to read anything brand new. We're going to read something we've covered many times over the years. Let's go to verse 11, Luke 15. We're going to read from 11 to the end of the chapter. Jesus is talking, and he said, a certain man had 2 sons. And the younger of them said to his father, Father, give me the portion of goods that falleth to me. And he divided unto them his living. And not many days after, the younger son gathered all together and took his journey into a far country, and there he wasted his substance with riotous living. And when he had spent all, there arose a famine, a mighty famine in that land, and he began to be in want. And he went and joined himself to a citizen of that country. And he sent him into his fields to feed swine. And he would fain have filled his belly with the husk that the swine did eat, and no man gave unto him. And when he came to himself, he said, how many hired servants of my father's have bread enough and to spare, and I perish with hunger? I will arise and go to my father, and will say unto him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before thee, and am no more worthy to be called thy son. Make me as one of thy hired servants. And he arose and came to his father. But when he was yet a great way off, his father saw him and had compassion, and ran and fell on his neck and kissed him. And the son said unto him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and thy sight, and no more worthy to be called thy son. But the father said to his servants, bring forth the best robe, and put it on him, and put a ring on his hand, and shoes on his feet, and bring hither the fatted calf, and kill it, and let us eat, and be merry. For this my son was dead, and is alive again. He was lost, and is found, and they began to be merry. Now his elder son was in the field, and as he came and drew nigh the house, he heard music and dancing. And he called one of the servants and asked what these things meant. And he said unto him, Thy brother is come, and thy father hath killed the fatted calf, because he hath received him safe and sound. And he was angry, and would not go in. Therefore came his father out, and entreated him. And he answering said to his father, Lo, these many years do I serve thee, neither transgressed I at any time thy commandment, and yet thou never gavest me a kid that I might make merry with my friends. But as soon as this thy son was come, which hath devoured thy living with harlots, thou hast killed for him the fatted calf. And he said unto him, Son, thou art ever with me, and all that I have is thine. It was meet that we should make merry and be glad, for this thy brother was dead and is alive again, and was lost and is found. This story of the wayward son in Luke 15 is almost always the focus of any lesson when we talk about this particular story, because he's a prodigal. A prodigal simply means he is one who is a waster, and so he has set a path that is filled with waste, and his choices that he makes prove to be a waste of time. They are a waste of opportunity. They are a waste of resources. But the greatest tragedy is it's the waste of a soul. He has squandered on things of the world and lost in value to God, to his fellow man, and even to himself. He's in a terrible place. But when we look at this story, always our minds are the same. We see the prodigal son. And oftentimes while we are aware there are others in the picture, we only see him and we only think about him. And in so doing, we miss these others in the story and overlook their part and their particular place in his return and his redemption. He's not the only one in the story. And without understanding their role and thinking about the part that they play, we can never really fully appreciate why he was mindful, even when this terrible place of sin surrounded him. He was mindful that he needed to return to a place where he could find redemption. That's the key. Without this one key character in this story, this young man never would have reflected on how to get back where he belonged. He might have reflected on where he was, but he never would have really known or really understood what he needed to do to make the kind of change that made his life of value once again. This one character in this story is the true, consistent pattern of what's really taking place. He set a pattern, an example that reminded this son, who is so far away in sin, of a better place, a place that he called home. This one character in this story set the pattern that would show him the best way and the only way that he could live his life and find true happiness and find real success and be the kind of man that he himself needed to be. This one character reminded him of a better way than the life he's now chosen for himself, and reminded him of a better light at the head of the tunnel than this place of darkness that he has allowed to envelop him. Now, the prodigal son and the elder brother are both characters in this story that provide for us a pattern. The prodigal is a pattern both of what not to do, and if you choose to do wrong, how to repair it. The elder brother, on the other hand, is a pattern of what not to do and how not to repair your life and how not to respond when we're trying to encourage somebody to change. Because he himself was not subject to change. His mindset was not where it needed to be at the place, the position he found in his own father's home. The most outstanding character in this story? Well, the main character is the prodigal son, but the outstanding character in this story is the father. He's the pattern. The father in this parable of the prodigal son in Luke 15 is a powerful symbol of God and God's unconditional love and God's unconditional forgiveness for those of us that are willing to embrace it. This father in this story embraces and embodies grace. He is filled with compassion. And like God, his willingness is to restore broken relationships. He represents God, and God represents a love that is extravagant. It is overflowing. Now, Jesus said in John 3 and verse 16, "For God so loved the world." That's overflowing. That's extravagant. God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in him should not perish, but have everlasting life. There's love exhausted. There's love in abundance. There's love in plenty. In the greatest form that can be given. Jesus said, "Greater love hath no man than this, that a man would lay down his life for his friends." And in a willing obedience to God the Father, his Father, he freely gave himself to die in our stead. God's love is unyielding. It never changes. There's never a day in your life, no matter where you find yourself, that the Father does not love you. His love is constant. Now, as physical fathers, since this is Father's Day, as physical fathers, sometimes we find our way difficult. Sometimes we find our way a source of frustration, and we get frustrated and we grow weary in well-doing, and we give up and we give in. And we justify our thinking because in our mind we say, those we love don't support us in what we're trying to do. They don't encourage me, and they don't follow this love and this example that I'm trying to set for them. And this frustration continues to grow as it seems that we continue to stand alone. And in the process, we get so weary in well-doing. And yet Paul said, "Let us not grow weary in well-doing, for we shall reap in due season if we faint not." So we've got to be steadfast. We've got to continue. This father had two sons. This represents God, and yet we find that neither son is where they should have been. And yet, his pattern. His example remains steadfast. It does not change. We serve the Father of lights, with whom there is no variableness, neither shadow of turning. There's not even a hint that God is going to change in His love and in His encouragement and in His strength that He will provide us with, and in His guiding light, the direction that we so desperately all need in our lives. Our Father's there, and that light shines brightly and consistently, and it will until this world is no more. Because His love is unconditional. His grace is abundant. And so despite the rebellion of both sons, this Father continues to set for them the right pattern. And this wasteful living that this prodigal had allowed himself to become engulfed in, the Father welcomes him back. After a life of squander, He welcomes him back with open arms. We notice that the Father sees the Son a great way off. That means the Father was watching. He was aware of His Son's condition, but He was also hopeful and encouraging that this Son would return. And when He sees this Son come back on the scene, He falls upon him and kisses him on his neck. He welcomes him with open arms. He showers him with a lavish celebration. And His love is demonstrated not based on the Son's worthiness, but is freely given. He continues to support and continues to encourage in every way. The Father's love is immediate and unrestrained, and He displays His affection and His love for this one who has gone astray, who has lived the worst possible life he could live. He had wasted what the Father had given him with harlots and squandered this precious gift that the Father had bestowed upon him with riotous living. That means that he was a rogue, he was a thug, he was anything you wouldn't want your son or your daughter to be. And yet the Father continues to love. And yet the Father continues to watch. And yet the Father continues to love and demonstrates His love when He sees this worthless, in our mind, individual come back on the scene to lift him up and to make him not as a hired servant. He runs, He embraces him, and He shows His deep compassion and His desire for reconciliation, and His actions speak louder than any words. As He puts the robe on him and puts the ring on his hand and has them prepare the fatted calf, and they join in a great celebration. He communicates His willingness to forgive without dwelling on these past mistakes that this son has committed, because forgiveness is involved. We love to live in the past. And yet the past is the one thing that we cannot change. The only thing we have in our hands that we can make a difference in is today. And today, if we make a difference today, tomorrow will be everything we want it to be. And God knows this. And so He encourages us, and He strengthens us, and He lifts us up if we'll trust in the Father. There's restoration. There's a great celebration because this son who was dead is now alive again. The Father recognizes that He has restored a soul. He has brought back this son that was dead back to life. This is a type of resurrection. He was dead in sin, and now He's alive once again. He restores this son who is now alive to his former position. He's not received as a servant, but he has received as a son. This is the totality of the kind of love that God has for every one of us. There is a total restoration of a relationship that is broken. Many years ago, up in Daisy, Arkansas, there was a man named Will and Faye. His wife's name was Faye. Their name was Cain. They were solid Christian people. And for some odd reason, they took a liking to me. Very few do, but they did. And so I went up and held a second meeting, and when I got there, Faye had, the last night of the meeting, had 2 presents for me to bring to my wife. She did these little gold gilded pieces. One of them was a horse, and the other was a little jewelry box about this long and about this wide, and she had wrapped those things in bubble wrap, and she was so proud. And she had them wrapped where there was no way they could break, and I had seen them. They were pretty. She said, I want your wife to have these. And so when I got home and I started unpacking my stuff, I said, oh, I got something for you. And I took the little old box out and I set it there on the shelf. And when I started coming apart with the little old horse, I did what I do best. I dropped it. Tammy doesn't have a clue what it looked like. I only have a memory because when it hit the floor, it broke into 1,000,000 pieces. And we just swept up the pieces and threw them away. I can tear stuff up where it can't be restored. We can all take something that could be beautiful, something that could be special, and we can live our lives in such a way that it becomes so damaged that it's not recognizable anymore. And it has no value, it has no purpose because we have corrupted what it intended to be to begin with. God can restore. There's a song we sing, bring Christ your broken life so marred by sin. There is a Father that can make us be exactly what we need to be. Our fathers, our physical fathers, as a dad, as a grandfather, as a man who sets a pattern for those that are looking to you, you need to give them the kind of example that will show them how not to be any longer broken, but how to be restored. Show them the path that they need to be on so that if they go their way and if they lose their way, and all will sin and come short of the glory of God, if and when they lose their way, you've given them a pattern that they can come back to. You've established for them something that they can depend on. This Father, God, in this story, is willing to restore, willing to bring back to life. He restores him to that former position, no longer a servant. He restored that broken relationship, and then there's a lavish celebration with the fatted calf and the best robe and the ring on his hand, the symbol of the joy and the abundance of God's kingdom when any sinner repents and returns. God is always consistently the same. He's not willing that any should perish, but that all should come under repentance. And Luke 15 and verse 10 is the key verse. We didn't read it, but it's just above where we started. This story actually has 3 parts if you read all of chapter 15. The prodigal son, the elder brother, and God the Father are the third part of this story. Read verse 10. Likewise I say unto you, there is joy in the presence of the angels of God over one sinner that repented. There's joy in the presence of the angels of God. Who is joyous? What's God? The angels are beholding as God rejoices over one simple sinner that repents. The Father's actions demonstrate that restoration is more important than public opinion. What does somebody think? And it's more important than the Son's past failings. What does it matter what I think? You and I need to get on board with God. As fathers, we need to get on board with God. As men, we need to get on board with God. Women need to get on board with God and be the kind of mothers that God wants us to be. Women need to get on board and be the kind of example that men and women together can be to encourage and support and strengthen those that are weak. We need to be the kind of pattern that people can look to. If I want to change, where would I go? The world teaches us one kind of change is success, and God teaches us a whole together different kind of change for success. And there's a great contrast with the older brother, the older son's reaction. There's a contrast between the grace of this father and this elder son who is filled with bitterness and self-righteousness. Notice his words. Lo, he's angry. Lo, these many years do I serve thee, never transgressed you. You never gave me a single solitary kid to eat. I couldn't make merry with my friends. But as soon as this thy son, what arrogance? This thy son. That's an arrogant expression to a father who's demonstrating his love. This, as soon as this thy son was come, which had devoured thy living with harlots, thou hast killed for him the fatted calf. The response of the father is filled with compassion. Son, thou art ever with me, and all that I have is thine. The father even went so far as to go out to this elder brother who's in the field who won't even come inside. I can't look on this, thy son. And he entreats him to come inside. This father humbled himself and entreated this arrogant, self-righteous elder brother to come inside. And he urges him to have compassion for his brother. And this father extends the same grace and the same love to the older son as he urges him to come in and join the celebration. And he emphasizes the importance of rejoicing over a lost soul found. He emphasizes the value of his own brother, of his own son. He says, it was meet that we should make merry and be glad, for this thy brother was dead and is alive again, and was lost and is found. The elder brother said, this thy son. The father said, this thy brother. Was dead and is alive again. He is symbolic. This father, the problem, he's God. He serves as that representation of God. God the Father, who is characterized by extravagant love. God the Father, who is characterized by forgiveness. God the Father, who is characterized by his desire to destroy broken relationships. God the Father, whose love is not earned or deserved, but who freely gives to all, encouraging them to turn away from a life that is filled with unsuccess, a life filled with no hope, a life filled with no light, no promise of things better, a life that turns to God. The life that lays aside every weight and the sin that does so easily beset us and runs with patience the race that is set before us by looking unto Jesus, the author and the finisher of our faith. God finds joy and we change. What a powerful portrayal of God and His unconditional love, His wonderful grace, His willingness to restore, and His plea throughout His book, throughout the Word. The entire book is filled with God challenging those who listen to embrace God's lavish love and teaching us to extend that same love to others. The parable challenges us to be like Him. And we all should be. But especially today, since this is Father's Day. Fathers, men alike, should be reminded that our labor is not in vain. The things that we do matter. The road sometimes might be hard, it might be difficult. We might not see any progress, but it's worth being what we must be, and be that steadfastly, even when things around us seem to be against us. For if God be for us, who then can be against us? If we give up, we neither lead in winning others to salvation nor manage to save ourselves. The fact is, only time will decide the outcome. For the destiny of every soul. But many souls hang in the balance, and those that are saved are determined by our own steadfastness. The Father, in this story, not only made a difference, but He is the difference. We're not God. None of us can pretend to be. But we're a living pattern. And we can be the kind of pattern, a consistent example, even in adversity, that can set the hearts and minds of all of our family to the place that affords us constant peace, even in turmoil. And our example can go beyond even our own family and encourage others to find that place of peace that affords constant comfort, satisfaction, salvation, peace, even in turmoil. Because we may all well be the only light in the world of darkness. And so we've got to be patient. But most of all, what we've got to do day in and day out is be there. Be there in that place where we are like our Father. That matters most. The prodigal son, well, he returned. He left the deepest pits to be found. He left a place where he was absent of the things that would encourage him to do what he should and could have been. He left a place that made him be in a place of being forever lost. His soul is wandering in a dry, barren land, and return is his only redemption. And he sees that he needs to return, but only because the Father had set for him a pattern throughout his life that was a success. As fathers, we must set the way. Back in 1979, maybe 1980, I was working for Bob Trainer. A little man, about yay tall, balding, I remember that. Came in there and had me work on his chainsaw. And we struck up a little bit of a conversation. That was it. About a month later, he came in and had me work on his chainsaw. And the second time I remembered his name was David Falk. And David Falk came to me wherever I was at. When I went to Winfield, he found out I was working down there, even though I still had the place in Jonesboro, he'd drive to Winfield. And he'd bring in his chainsaw, and we had many a conversation. And I found out a few things about David Falk. I found out that David Falk was once a member of the church and had not been faithful in many years, but I also found out that his daddy led singing in Chatham when the church met there. And he had led singing at Jonesboro some over the years. And they lived out in the middle of nowhere. You can't get there from here. You can't even throw a dead cat and hit where David Falk lives, or used to live. Minnie Melton, who was a pillar, who owned Minnie Mall, Chatham, was a member of the church here. David was her cousin. And after many years, I invited David several times, and he always brushed me off. Minnie convinced him to come, and David came, and David made things like they needed to be, and he became a faithful member of the church. He died a Christian. I preached his funeral. It was an honor and a privilege. David's dad never stopped for his entire life trying to get his son to do what he needed to do and be what he needed to be. In later years, David talked about his dad with the most fond memories you could have, but his dad never saw him be a faithful Christian in those later years, and he died not knowing what the outcome would ever be for David. He knows now. And it matters not then, because he knows now. David told me one time, David smoked, and his daddy wanted him to quit smoking, and he said, son, I just wish you'd give those things up. Said, they're not good for you. Said, they're not good for you at all. And David popped off, and he tried to find every reason in the world to make his daddy leave him alone. And he popped off, and he said, I tell you what, if you give up that coffee, I'll give up them cigarettes. And his daddy said, okay, that's the deal. So guess what his daddy did? He quit drinking coffee. And David said, I didn't have any choice but to quit smoking. And he said, I went back to him later and begged him, please, Daddy, I know how much you love your coffee. He said, my daddy loved coffee. He drank coffee all day long. He said, go ahead and have your coffee. I'm through with this. It's done. He said, son, a deal's a deal. Those are the kind of memories and the kind of impressions that this dad made on his son. Who's to say, yeah, I invited him, yeah, many of them all encouraged him, but who's to say, I'll bet you the farm that his daddy, who had been dead for many years, still had a lasting impact on this little bitty short man that later on made a change. We matter. Whether we think we do or whether we think we don't, we matter. We matter for our own salvation. But more than anything else, we matter for the salvation of those that we love the most. I love you. I love your children. I even love old Jacob back here. I love y'all the same, but I have a little special soft spot for those that are mine. Should have, supposed to. That's only natural. Doesn't mean I don't love you, it just means I love them different. Why in the world wouldn't we do everything we can? Everything within our means, at every opportunity that God blesses us to enjoy. Continue to do those things that encourage those that we love to go to a place called heaven. Amen. John wrote in Revelation, said, "Blessed are the dead which died in the Lord, yea, henceforth, saith the Spirit. They do rest in their labors, and their works follow after them." Paul writes in 1 Corinthians 15 and verse 58, he says, "Therefore, my beloved brethren, be ye steadfast, unmovable, always abounding in the work of the Lord, for as much as you know that your labor is not in vain in the Lord." And this same Paul wrote in the book of Ephesians, said, "Ye fathers, provoke not your children to wrath, but bring them up in the nurture and admonition of the Lord." Sooner or later, we all go to our own reward. And sooner or later, we'll be gone. And our ability to be seen will disappear when we leave. And all that will be left will be simple memories of who we once were. Given 2 generations, perhaps 3, it depends on how long they manage to live and how old they are when we leave here. Absent of the 3rd generation, we'll just be who? But the pattern that we set, as it's handed down from generation to generation to generation, the same name and the same example and the same character will be passed on from one generation to the next generation to the next generation to the next generation. And that'll be those that are like Christ. That's what we really pass along. Paul said, "Let this mind be in you, which was also in Christ Jesus." And Paul said, "If any man have not the Spirit of Christ, he's none of his." And Peter said, "Christ suffered for us, leaving us an example that ye should follow in his steps." In the great scheme of things, when all the dust is settled, that's really all that matters. What an example the Father is in Luke chapter 15. Would you like to respond this morning? Come now. While I get them standing and sing for encouragement.